I'm here with Dr. John Standley. John is an agricultural chemist whose career spans more than 30 years with the Queensland Department of Primary Industries, Natural Resource Management. In 2009, John received from Her Excellency, the Governor of Queensland, a Medal of the Order of Australia for his contribution to agricultural science through soil and plant research and to the community. So John, can you tell us a bit more about who you are and the history of your work and why we're here today?
So basically I was involved with the agricultural chemistry branch, as it used to be, of the DPI. First of all based at the research station in North Queensland at South Johnson, near Innisfail, but that gave me insights into a large number of agricultural projects. Then I moved to Biloela in Central Queensland. Of course that gave me insights into dryland agriculture, salinity problems and all sorts of other projects. Then finally to the Queensland Wheat Research Institute in the 1980s, and of course that was a much larger laboratory with a vast scope of projects, not only across the Darling Downs but from other parts of Queensland as well and New South Wales. And so that's given me a real feel for the land and the importance of looking after the land for future generations, as well as having excellent agricultural research to back decisions that are made.
Recently you gave a lecture, didn't you, to a forum in Brisbane. Can you tell us a bit about the background of that forum?
This was a forum of speakers who are very concerned about the rate at which mining development and coal seam gas development is planned in Queensland, and also about certain areas that we believe should be retained as prime agricultural land and should never be mined because of the environmental and consequences. And so there were, I think, 9 or 10 speakers at least, and I was one of the first speakers.
Okay. So what can you tell us about this first slide when we bring this up?
So my address was agriculture and mining, some challenges. The first slide we see here shows the Felton area and the Hodgson Creek. Now this area between here and the hills is planned for mining for the Ambre Energy coal mining project. We can see just looking at it, it's a very rich agricultural area, and then you can consider the range of crops that can be grown and also the other activities that are nearby, horticultural areas. And if you flick to the next slide, you'll see the alternative would be this, which is Ackland Coal Mine. Can you ever imagine that being returned to prime agricultural land and production? So people have to decide, do they want the agricultural area or do they want the mine? I know which I believe should be is correct in this part of the world. And so we proceed to the next slide. And that gives an idea of the people talk about what's special about the soils of the Darling Downs. This is a Waco soil. It's about 1.8 metres deep. It has very excellent water holding properties up to 250 millimetres, which means that once you get a good soaking, that will be excellent moisture for growing a crop right through almost to maturity, perhaps with the minimal rainfall as well. So this is typical of the Darling Downs soils, the rich, unique agricultural soils. And also, they've never been mined before. If they are mined, it's never been shown that those types of soils can be returned to agricultural production later on. So we continue on, and there's another example of a brigalow soil near Capun. Again, rich agricultural soil, vast areas of this across the Darling Downs, very specialised, with growing a whole range of crops. And we'll go further to the next slide, which shows how the nutrients are concentrated close to the surface. This is another brigalow clay soil. You'll see how the phosphorus in this particular slide is close to the surface, nearly 25 milligrams per kilogram to the surface. Now unless you can retain that surface 4 inches or 10 centimetres intact, you could end up with the lower layer, which is 20 to 40, where you see there's hardly any phosphorus. And if the subsoil becomes the topsoil, you can see straight away you've lost your inherent soil fertility. And the same goes for other nutrients as well. And the other problem, of course, with many of the soils, they have salt at depth. Now, as we all know, sodium is a serious problem, saline problems. This is a typical brigalow clay soil. Now, consider the figure of 6 is marginal. You'll see there's hardly any exchangeable sodium in the surface, but we're getting up to a figure of about 27 in the subsoil. So if the subsoil becomes the topsoil, you could say goodbye to that as agricultural land. So the other question is, how well can we mine the soils and retain the various layers intact? And if you wonder about salinity, the next one I'll show you shows the impact of salts such as you have in the coal seam gas water if they're released across the land for a period of time. And this is an area which has been affected by bicarbonate and alkaline waters. Now, as you may well know, with coal seam gas, there's vast quantities of salt also in much of that underground water. And no one really knows what to do with the salt. So if you want to use that for agriculture, that could be one of the consequences. We might go to the next slide. If the salt ends up close to the surface, this is an area where you can actually see the white salt on the surface. You can see the crops dying. It took years and years and years to restore even this paddock back to agricultural production. So with any mining activities, we want to be very, very careful that we don't have this salt accumulation in the soil. And we're continuing on, I think, to the next slide. The other aspect of coal seam gas, of course, is that there's a vast network of pipes, probably about half-kilometre intervals across properties. Now, if you imagine that you want to try and move stock across land like that, you imagine you want to try and move irrigation equipment, you want broad-acre farming, in which the farmers have invested so much. Having a network like that makes it virtually impossible, as well as having people in and out to service those gas well heads, possibly leaving gates open, all sorts of things. So I just ask the audience to consider, if you were a farmer and that was the network of pipes on your farm, how on earth do you think you might continue to farm that land? So we need a moratorium. We need to select the poorer areas, I believe, of Queensland, poorer agricultural areas for the mining, coal mining and for coal seam gas, and retain the richest areas such as I showed you there at Felton for agriculture for the future. If we can retain areas as national parks, why on earth can't we retain the best agricultural soils in a similar way for future generations?